Hello, and welcome to Adventures in Regression Therapy. I'm Steve Burgess, hypnotherapist and regression specialist, and together with members of my team, we'll be introducing you to the fascinating world of past life regression. In each episode, we'll be discussing the importance of regression therapy, the range of physical, emotional, and spiritual issues it can help with, and sharing some of our clients' stories from the many thousands of regression sessions we've facilitated over the years. We hope you enjoy the ride with us as we explore the power of past life regression. Hello, Burgess here with my colleague Monique Glover in Canada. Welcome to the new episode of Adventures in Regression Therapy. What we're trying to do in these interviews and these discussions is just bring you some information about regression therapy and the world of regression therapy. And what we thought we'd talk about today, famous past lives, is when we find very occasionally that we work with a client who turns out to have been very famous in a previous lifetime. Now, what I will say is this: that the accusation against past life regression is that everybody who's been in a past life has been Henry VIII or Cleopatra, or they believe they have been. And so people often say that there's therefore, the past lives are not real. Well, hardly ever do we get a famous past life coming through. And together we've done many thousands of regression sessions over the years. We've only had a few famous people in past lives. Having said that, the ones that we have had have been extremely interesting. And so what we thought we'd do today, we'd talk about a couple of famous past life characters, one of mine, which actually connects to one of Monique's clients in her past life. Now, I'm talking about one of the characters in my book, Famous Past Lives, which I wrote some years ago about these experiences my clients have had, who appear to be very famous in previous lifetimes. And the one I'd like to really share with you is Queen Elizabeth I of England, because she's sort of internationally known as a strong character who lived in the 1500s in England. She ruled England very well. She never married. She was allegedly the Virgin Queen, etc. During her reign, the Armada was defeated, etc. So Spain couldn't attack England and take her over. And what happened is this: a lady contacted me because she was in her office at work when she touched the hand of one of her colleagues, a male colleague who she got on with very well, but they weren't lovers or anything. They were just very good friends. And immediately this triggered off an image in her mind of a lady in a very big, long dress with long red hair, moving up and down a room, feeling very, very frustrated. And she said, I cannot get this image out of my head. It's been with me every day since this incident when this gentleman passed me a file, our hands touched, and zing, this memory came through. So she called me and said, well, what is it? And I said, well, it might be past life, and come and see me and we'll do a session. And so I guided her into trance, and immediately she went back into this experience, and she saw herself as this young woman, very big flowing dress in an oak paneled room, walking up and down the room, feeling very, very frustrated because she was waiting for somebody to come. And eventually the door opens and this very grand man stands there in these very grand clothes, and they rush into each other's arms and they're kissing and hugging. And that's the man that she was waiting for. So that was all very interesting. For me as a therapist, I'm thinking, well, that's a pretty standard past life experience. It is, Monique, isn't it? We find that people connect in past lives in that way. But I then moved her further on in the past life in the session, and she then saw herself sitting on a throne with hundreds of people looking at her, and a man came over and bowed to her and said, "Your Majesty." And immediately I thought, well, she's maybe a minor royal. But as we continued doing some work, it became more and more obvious that she was Queen Elizabeth I of England. And we then did a lot of sessions where we put flesh on the bones of a historical character. And it's known that Queen Elizabeth I was in love with Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. And in fact, even Dudley actually proposed marriage to her at some stage. But when he did that, she actually closed things down because he wasn't royal enough to marry her. He was just a nobleman. But historians know that they were very much in love, but they didn't feel, nobody really knows about what happened with them. Well, my client then experienced a whole load of passionate experiences with Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. They went hunting and they hid away so that kiss and have a kiss and a cuddle together. She even experienced having sex with him. And that sort of therefore puts paid to the reputation that she had as being the Virgin Queen, because she wasn't. And so she had these amazing experiences. And what came through at the end of Elizabeth's life, before Elizabeth died, Robert Dudley died. They'd been separated for quite a number of years at this stage. And in one of our sessions, she had received the letter from Dudley, and it was his last letter from her to her. And when she found out that he'd died, she remembers sitting in a room. She barricaded herself in a room in the palace, and she just sobbed and cried for, I think, 2 or 3 days and wouldn't come out of her room. And what my client remembered was on the letter, she wrote his last letter, and then she folded it up and put it into a special box that she had. And that box and that letter still exists to this day. And that letter does say his last letter, written in ink by Queen Elizabeth in the 1600s. So, she came up with things like that, which are true. And I don't think she would have known these things were true because she'd never studied Elizabeth.
Yeah. How would she come up with a detail like that? That's just so specific.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the passion and the love that they had was amazing. And it's so sad that they were not allowed to marry, because I think they would have been very happy together.
It brings a lot of humanity to the history books. I feel you study these characters, as you said, almost as if they were characters in a novel and not actual people. And when you talk about these experiences she had and this love and the sadness around his death, it makes them what they were. They were humans,
Yes.
Yeah. Very different roles than most of the other humans, but they experienced humanity just like everyone else did.
Yeah. So Elizabeth was just a remarkable whole series of sessions I had with that lady. So, but let's talk about your connection with Elizabeth, with your client.
Yeah, that's interesting, because unlike your client came with this curiosity, were you working on anything with her, or it was just the curiosity of why the memories came?
Just curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah. So connecting to Elizabeth, which I found was fascinating, because I obviously knew you had a client that was Elizabeth. So when I came across a client in my regular sessions who came to me for fear of flying and anxiety we were working on, and she turned out to be Mary Queen of Scots, I thought, oh, well, this is an interesting turn of events. I need to figure out what if Steve has gone into that a little bit. And I believe you said that she did talk about Mary a little bit in her sessions, didn't she?
Yes, she did. She was constantly, Elizabeth was constantly under pressure to put Mary Queen of Scots to death, to have her executed. And Elizabeth withstood that pressure for a long time. And my client remembered actually eventually signing Mary Queen of Scots' death warrant and being very, very upset by it, extremely upset by it. But she had to do it. Her hand had been forced. But so she did come up with that in the session.
It's almost interesting how we got these two perspectives, because also unlike your Elizabeth, both me and my client really had no idea she was Mary Queen of Scots for a little bit, because it's not like the clients come in and say, I am so and so, and I am at this grand ball, and this is what's happening. That sometimes you have no clue other than, like you said, okay, it seems like it has this royal flavor, but we need to figure out what's going on. So when she first started talking about Elizabeth, I had no idea that it was Elizabeth at the time, but there was obviously a lot of anger that we were working on releasing around this woman. So we knew it was a woman, and she talked a lot about her being this evil, mean woman, and just so much anger and hatred towards her, and talking about, I don't know why she hates me, that she thinks I'm taking something from her, and she's afraid of me, that I have something that she needs, and it's not true, and I don't know why she hates me so much. She's accusing me of all of these things that aren't true, and she talks about being tricky, and untrustworthy. And then it wasn't until later she starts talking about that she took my role and she has me locked away, and I hope she lets me out. And it was always a she, and I have this feeling of being held somewhere. She said, hoping that my family lets me out. So that was interesting. It was more than once that she kind of referred to family ties. And so we figured, like you, that there was something kind of royal happening, because it seemed like she was in a well-to-do house, and my client's very visual, so could describe these, beautiful ball gowns she was wearing, that she had very pale skin and red hair. And so we were trying to figure out kind of who this person was. And as you know, Steve, we use a technique with the subconscious called the ideomotor response, or we call it the IMR, where we're able to ask the subconscious directly yes or no questions. And the subconscious responds using usually movements in the hands and the fingers. So it's great because it gives us a little bit of advantage. You can do a little bit of sleuthing of, okay, what era are we looking at? Which countries are we looking at? This came back to France and England. And if you know Mary Queen of Scots, she spent her youth in France. So we're kind of trying to figure out who this person is, kind of narrowing it down, almost like that game 20 questions you played as a kid of, well, do they have this? Do they have that? And kind of came up with my list of, okay, who I think the finalists were. Threw in a couple, extras in there just to see if we can, throw off the subconscious a little bit, which, spoiler, you can't, but it's fun to try sometimes to see if you can throw off, and start direct questioning. Is it so-and-so? Is it so-and-so? So for Mary Queen of Scots, which I didn't even think she was, there were some other people that seemed to kind of fit the bill a little bit more. And then her hand just went right up, shot right up. And sometimes that happens too, that you'll kind of get, soft responses, and sometimes you'll get very strong, like the subconscious wants to make emphasis that, yes.
This is a yes.
Yes,
This is
yes.
a yes. That finger goes up like yes.
Yes, finally, like after all these other stupid questions you asked me, you nailed it, right?
Yeah. I think maybe we should mention as well the sort of historical background to this is that for those people who don't know much about English history, so Elizabeth was the Queen of England. She was the daughter, one of the daughters of Henry VIII. Mary, Queen of Scots, was I think she was the mother actually of the James who followed Elizabeth as king, and there was always a strong feeling that people wanted her to be the queen. So, and there was quite a movement towards that. And of course, in those days, they didn't know when people were going to suddenly come down from Scotland with an army and try and take over and dislodge Queen Elizabeth. So there was always that fear that Mary would get a lot of support. So Elizabeth had her under house arrest in a big house, a big country house somewhere in England. and she was under house arrest for a long time. And Elizabeth had spies who were catching messages that were going to and from Mary. Mary didn't know this. There were letters coming in and out, but they'd been read before Mary got them or before the people outside got them. And for a long time, Mary resisted saying, let's have a revolution and let's see if I can take the crown. But at some stage she did that. And at that stage, when that letter was found, saying, okay, let's get me out of here and let's, let me see if I can take the crown. That's when Elizabeth took the decision, okay, she's got to die now because she's now a competitor. So that's the background anyway.
And the struggle too, you kind of touched on it too, between the religious wars.
Of course, good point.
Mary was Catholic and Elizabeth was Protestant, and there was big, political things going on about religion at the time. And it was funny actually that Mary in one of her sessions talked about, she says, I feel Catholic. And it was just, very random thing to say, like, I feel I have, brown hair. She's like, I feel Catholic. And then she said, it feels like it's a theme woven into my life and everybody's life. And then she recounted a memory of going into church. And it was just interesting because it was another just very subtle thing about her life that was woven in there and kind of gives a bigger picture.
And it's not really the sort of thing that a non-historian would know about. Your client, somebody who, where is she living? Is she Canada or America?
No, in America. And that's the thing too. She's in the United States. She said there was much of an emphasis on, history. Yeah.
She's never read this stuff. She's not studied it.
No.
So to come out with something like that in a session is really significant.
Yes. And that she doubted it too. I mean, that's also, I think, an important thing to say is lots of our clients, when they have these experiences, they're doubting it and they come out of it looking at us like, I don't know, I feel like I made that up. That doesn't make sense. I don't want to be this person. And for this client, it took her a while to actually, I don't know, take ownership, I guess, in that way of, okay, I was that person and these things that are coming through are very accurate, which is, I mean, for history geeks like us, it's very exciting when they come up with all these minor details that we can validate later. But for her, we were working specifically on the anxiety and also on the sensation in the throat that would come up. So when she was feeling anxious, it almost felt like a closing up of the throat. And we had done other sessions where, yes, that was the case. There was, different trauma to the throat. There was an ancestor who had anxiety, and same thing, everything was coming up in the throat. So for her, when she recounted Mary's death, Mary was beheaded. So it was very, very viscerally in the throat. She was feeling it in the session. I mean, I should note, it's not like she was feeling the pain of being beheaded, but there's an energy, almost like a tingling. It comes out, this feeling in the body, and other sensations about, she was saying she felt like she was falling down a hole and then she hit her head. And obviously no one can say what it feels like to die by beheading, but all just these very interesting kind of sensations in the body, and the whole time the throat felt tight. And often in regression, we have to go through the death multiple times, especially when they're very traumatic like that. And every time the throat tightness just started fading until there was nothing. But something that was also peculiar is that she mentioned spreading her arms out. She said, I feel like I'm spreading my arms out, like I'm flying. And sure enough, with research later, we found out that was actually how Mary was positioned, was with her arms out. So things, again, very minor things like that she wouldn't have.
She wouldn't know. If you'd have said, well, okay, you are Mary Queen of Scots, you get beheaded.
Yes.
How does it happen? The client would, if they're making it up or whatever, or something, they'd say, oh, I can feel my head being chopped off. But these tiny incidental details, having her arms out while she's being beheaded, just sort of prove this is proof that this client is Mary Queen of Scots. She's not read this. It's coming through from one of her past lives.
And also inside things that wouldn't have been known in the history books either, unless it might have been maybe in her inner circle. But we found out that she did a lot of recreational drug use. So she had a session where she was experiencing being high off of something. And of course, you kind of ask the questions. This was before we knew she was Mary and how she died. Of, okay, well, were you drugged in some way? What's happening? Why are you kind of having all these weird hallucinations? And we found out that she frequently used drugs recreationally to escape these feelings of boredom and being trapped in loneliness. So definitely not all the glamour that you see on the TV shows of this being fabulous life. That most of the sessions were all about her being misunderstood and just trying to escape being trapped in this way.
And I think you've said that before, that when we talked about this, that she didn't have a lot of rancor against Elizabeth. She was angry about being locked up, but she didn't have a lot of hatred for Elizabeth to start with. That sort of grew, I think, as she got more and more incarcerated.
Yes. Yeah, it was at the end, and it was all surrounded about, actually, there was a lot of work we were doing about misunderstood and how she still felt misunderstood in this. That really seemed to grow as she was, put under house arrest like that Elizabeth just didn't seem to understand her and didn't want to reason with her. It was, well, like you said, she made her decision, and this is this, and we're going to lock you away now. That there was no room for discourse. It's like, I made the decision and this is how it's going to be. She really felt very stripped of that, especially after having a really great kind of childhood in France, which she recounted as well too, kind of being in the woods and her youth of feeling very free. And Mary did. She had a great youth in France. And then after that, there was just one horrible event after the other. And, her young husband had passed away. Her mother had passed away. Then she went back to Scotland. And it was almost like all of this was just very quickly stripped away from her. And she went through a lot of trauma in her older years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. Also connection with her ex too, which came later. So her ex in this current lifetime ended up being her second husband, Mary's second husband in that lifetime. And we released a lot of energy about their connection in this lifetime, kind of still having that energetic kind of butting heads that allowed her to move on from that relationship now as well. And again, weird details, like she said, oh, he has a small head, like which made us both laugh. What do you mean he has a small head? And if you look at pictures of her second husband, sure enough, he has a very remarkably small head. But yeah, just very again, highlights a lot of the hardship that she had to go through. And I think most royals had to go through. It wasn't all glamour. And if someone was making it up, you would think that's what they would focus on. Something like a TV show that is very glamorous. There's a lot of balls. There's, a lot of freedom, when actually it was the opposite. There was a lot less freedom and more control.
Yes, a lot of control. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so your client really came up with a lot of verifiable historical information in those sessions that she would never in a million years have known unless she'd studied Mary Queen of Scots, which she never has done. This is one of the amazing things. We'll probably do another podcast like this and just talk about some of the other famous ones with clients we've had. And, again, the specific information they can come up with is just remarkable.
And you look and they really have, people who doubt it, they really have no motive. If they're coming to you to get better, why would they make up being this famous person? It makes sense. You're coming here because you have anxiety that you want to get rid of. So you can live your life more freely, not to sit here and make up a story for me, right?
It's very much so.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely the case. Very much the case, And I mean, there's no benefit for this, in terms of people making up stories about being famous when they're in therapy. But why would they do that? You're absolutely correct.
So, and most of them keep it very quiet between, us and them, and
yeah,
don't want to talk about it.
well, they don't go broadcasting this. They're not into saying, well, oh, look at me, I was this famous person. That doesn't happen. They're as shocked as we are when it comes through. But the most important thing is they get better from the issues we're working on anyway, and that's, of course, the most important thing. But along the way, we have a really fascinating time, don't we?
Yes, it is. It's so interesting. It's really fascinating to see, as you say, put the flesh on the bones of that person. It makes you really realize how much of history we're missing out on, that all of the books just really do have the bare bones. That I think that part is very fascinating too. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Monique. Those are our two Elizabethan past lives. We'll be back with some more in the near future. Thanks so much, Monique. Thanks for watching, and that's goodbye from Monique and Burgess. See you next time. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Adventures in Regression Therapy. For more information about Steve Burgess and his team, check out steveburgesshypnosis.com or connect on Facebook or Instagram. Steve's books, The Power of Past Life Regression and Famous Past Lives, are available through his website and Amazon, and are available as audiobooks through Audible. Free hypnotherapy recordings are available on YouTube on Hypno for All. That's Hypno, the number 4, all.